Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, welcome to Robservations. Robservations episode 274. My God, I couldn't have done this without you. You members, you imagination connoisseurs, members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your support. And I, of course, I'm the viceroy of verisimilitude. I am the master of fun and wonder. I am the existential Mr. Rogers, your host, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. And I thank you all for being here. And as you know, these shows are brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And if you are so inclined, go to their great website at getluckytiger.com. And when you check out, punch in PGS for this, PGS as a code for this, the Post-Geek Singularity community, and you will get 20% off your order. And by the way, if you go to the website, this website that was built for you, part of this channel, the Burnettwork.net, and you comment on any one of the over 800 pieces of content on this website, you're entered into a drawing where you could win a bottle of Lucky Tiger's great all over from head to tail. I love it. They call it the head to tail body wash, which I adore. It's light, it's lively, it'll change your life. We're giving one away this week. Actually, we're going to give one away every week until the 300th episode of Robservations on December 7th. So all you have to do is comment on anything on the website. You're immediately entered into a random drawing, a giveaway for one of those bottles. I'm sorry to say it's only for North America, but hopefully we'll expand to the rest of the world soon because half my audience is from other countries. Anyway, welcome to the most authentic. It's funny. Somebody wrote me and said, Rob, of all the YouTube genre guys or girls, you're the most authentic because you actually work in the industry. Well, some other people do, but I appreciated that. Today, there's only one thing to talk about. Well, there's two things and they're commingled. One, of course, being The Mandalorian. The first live action Star Wars series, the second live action Star Wars show to ever appear on television, which The Mandalorian makes canonical. God love Jon Favreau. Yes, 1978's the Star Wars holiday special, of course, as everyone knows, is now canonical because Life Day is mentioned in the debut show of The Mandalorian. First of all, I have to say, to be honest, I try and be honest with everyone. I've got a long, of all of us YouTube people that service the genre fan space, I'm probably the oldest. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being the old man with one foot in his grave, but I am not the man who's going to sit there and scream from his lawn, "Get off my lawn!" No, I never do that. I'm more about inclusion. As a matter of fact, I think I'm more enthusiastic about this stuff than anyone. The more I get, the more I become seasoned, the more I feel that I love this stuff more than ever. Today was one of those days. Why do I stay so excited? Why do I stay so frosty? No, not because I got more parts for my part number 19 for my 1/8 scale Aston Martin DB5 that I hope to have built before No Time to Die. Thank you, Eagle Moss. But I have to say that there's so many exciting things. And today I'm going to be honest. Today I feel I have been thrown into an existential quandary, not because I'm on some middle-aged crazy and decided I need to go buy a sports car, unless you include a 1/8 scale vintage Aston Martin as part of that, which I don't, because I've wanted a 1/8 scale Aston Martin since I had my first diecast Corgi Aston Martin when I was like 5, whatever. Today, I'm having to come to grips with the fact that for the very first time in my life, I understand why physical media might come to an end. And to be honest, I never thought I would say this, ladies and gentlemen. I never thought that it would come to this. I have been buying physical media since I was 13 years old in 1980. Do the math. That's how old I am. Yes. What was my very first piece of physical media? Some of you, if you did a Robservations trivia contest, some would answer, some might not know. This is really obscure. The very first piece of physical media that I owned was a VHS tape of John Carpenter's Halloween that had been issued on Meta before it became Media. It was Charlie Band's first video company. I think it was Meta and then Wizard Video. But Meta, which was the name of his first wife, Meta Home Entertainment, that later became Media Home Entertainment. I bought the very first VHS. Well, I didn't. My parents did. I was 13. It was my bar mitzvah. It was 1980. And they bought me two things for my 13th birthday. They bought me that tape, and it was $56 or something, $54, which, in 1980, not an insubstantial amount of money. And the next thing they bought me was an upgraded skateboard. They bought me a Kryptonics deck. I had a Kryptonics deck. I had Tracker X tracks. Those were my trucks. And I had Kryptonic 65 millimeter wheels. It was a custom skateboard that, by the way, it was parted out for me, and I had to put it together myself because I would insist on that because that's the way I was when I was 13. So I got Halloween, and I got my Kryptonics, my Krypt stick, my Tracker X tracks, my Kryptonic 65 millimeter wheels. So it was a pretty good birthday, ladies and gentlemen. I became a man and had those things. So I've been buying physical media for 39 years, 39 and a half years to be accurate. So buying physical media, collecting movies physically, buying them. Started out with VHS, bought a lot of VHS, very expensive. I also bought a lot of very expensive at the time, blank VHS tapes, copied a lot of things or taped a lot of things off Showtime. I also was a video pirate. And I also I duplicated a lot of tapes. I had 4 VCRs days chained together. I was a bad kid. My mom once found lots of money in a drawer of mine, and she was convinced I was a drug dealer. And I was like, Mom, do I strike you as somebody that does drugs? What do you think I do all the time? I mean, I work all the time at a video store, and what I do when I was 16, this is when I was 16, I would bribe projectionists and managers of theaters to run a film. So I would take my video equipment in and film the screen and sell tapes at $150 a pop. Because that's what kids did back in the early 80s. That's how you made money. You bootlegged movies. That's what I knew. But anyway, so physical media has been a big thing in my life. And I have gone through phases. It went from VHS, and in 1985, I got the very first Combi Laserdisc player, the CLD, Pioneer CLD 900 Combi Laserdisc and CD player. And that was it. My videotapes, I didn't care. 5 years of videotapes were enough. I went strictly Laserdisc. I got rid of all my tapes. I gave them away. I just didn't care. Thousands of movies on tape, just didn't care. I wanted Laserdiscs. For me, it was always about the best quality presentation. That was it. I dreamt of a day where we could actually recreate the theater experience in the home theater. And while I've never had the money to make the kind of home theater I've always wanted to, luckily I've had very rich friends that have. They have $5,000 projectors, $1 million theaters. I mean, one of my big pet peeves is I watch a lot of home videos, here's a $14 million mansion with a home theater in it. And the home theater system is lacking because the people they employ to make it, it's an afterthought. It's not about how it looks, or it's all about how it feels. It's not about how the room looks. It's about how the movies look and sound. That's all that matters in a home theater. And it's not about what kind of chairs you have. It's about the presentation. Like Oscar Schindler said, presentation. So I've always been about that. So why am I in an existential crisis? I'll tell you why. So last night, Disney Plus launched. The Disney streaming service, Disney Plus, launched. They went on the air. Now, I had signed up beforehand. I paid for a year in advance. And it was supposed to go online, even on their website. It was supposed to go online on the West Coast at 3 a.m. I was looking at their website, but yeah, then on Twitter, when I was going off about last night's Seahawks game, the alert came up. Disney Plus is live. This is about 11:30. I went online. Sure enough, I went to the website, Disney Plus website. I've been waiting to see if the app was able to be downloaded on Amazon Fire. It was not. Elizabeth went to bed. I came out here working on the computer. And sure enough, logged into Disney Plus. It was live. So immediately I watched The Mandalorian twice, back to back. And then when it was over, I jumped around Disney Plus. I wanted to check it out. I have to say, I have mixed feelings because I loved it. Loved it. I kudos to Disney. We have a mutual friend. I mean, Elizabeth had a friend that I met who has been working on Disney Plus for the last, a while, has told us certain things, but I didn't know what questions. I can't believe it. I didn't ask the questions I wanted to know that I didn't even know I wanted to know. So we've heard a lot of things. Let me tell you about Disney Plus. First impressions. Love the interface. When you first turn on Disney Plus and it loads up and you get your featured films, it's like going into a candy store when you're a little kid, or going to Farrell's, if you ever went to Farrell's, where you just look up and there's this smorgasbord of candy and colors. It's delightful. That's what Disney Plus is like, because unlike, say, Netflix, when you see the Netflix logo on every little thing, or it's all designed. I mean, it's not some of the artwork is, but it's the artwork and it's the logo of the movie. They showcase the content, and you just immediately feel joy. Very well done. I mean, the way everything is presented, it is colorful, it's enticing, it's intoxicating, really well done. And then you realize that these are the featured films. So then you go up and you look at films alphabetically, and you just go alphabetically, and then it presents every movie that's available alphabetically in the same format, and you just scroll. So it's like a sugar rush. Really amazing. So I really enjoyed that. I was surprised to see, I'm going to get to that. I'll get to that in a while. So one of the first things after I watched The Mandalorian the first time through, watched all the credits, like Netflix, I find this, okay, streaming people, Robert Meyer Burnett says this to you. Somebody had to make these shows. It really chaps my ass when the credits, you want to move out of the credits and go to the next show before the credits roll. You know what? These people had to make this show. They worked on it. I always try and watch the credits. Sometimes when I'm binging, I might not. I understand. But for The Mandalorian, I wanted to watch all the credits, which I had to hit a button for, like on most streaming services, to hear the music, the credits. At the end of the credits, first thing that pops up, Empire Strikes Back. If you like The Mandalorian, watch The Empire Strikes Back. Now, why is that cool? Why is that cool? Why The Empire Strikes Back? Why not Star Wars? You know why, Star Wars fans? Because Boba Fett was introduced in The Empire Strikes Back. The first time we ever saw a Mandalorian, bounty hunters. We don't need their scum. I mean, it took thought. Everything about Disney Plus, the online service, somebody was thinking. And that is evidenced throughout the architecture of the site, the usability of the site, the navigation of the site. I found that I could zing in and out of whatever Star Wars movie I wanted to very, very quickly. And I was watching space battles and this. There's special features. There's an extras tab that you can look at. And there's extra features. There's deleted scenes. It's not all the extras that exist, but I'll bet you as the years go by, Disney will eventually throw up every single bit of special features that exist, which means some of my special features that have been relegated to history, maybe the trash heap of history, might show up there. But I was very impressed by that. But here's the thing that I was most impressed by. The Star Wars movies, unannounced, are all in 4K. They're all in 4K and they're all in Dolby Atmos. which in terms of home video presentation, creme de la creme. This is the Tiffany standard. You get that little blue box with the white ribbon. This is Tiffany, man. There are not physical media copies of the Star Wars movies that have been officially released. Sure, you can burn them if you got the despecialized or the -1 versions, whatever. But 4K, Dolby Vision, amazing. Now, as anyone knows, there's basically 3 different kinds of HDR, high dynamic range. There is HDR10, HDR10 Plus, and HDR, well, Dolby Vision. The difference is, it's very simple. Basically, when you put a 4K disc in your machine, if it's just HDR, it sets a certain look. So when you're watching, you have the best calibrated equipment in the world, but if it's HDR, then it talks to your player, your disc player talks to your TV, and it gives them a certain amount of gives the TV a certain look. But Dolby Vision updates that metadata all the time, so the look is changing based on whether it's nighttime or whether it's daytime. So in terms of HDR, Dolby Vision is the creme de la creme. And at launch, Disney Plus, and while they were not touting this, the Star Wars movies are available in 4K Dolby Vision, which is very significant if you have that kind of equipment and you're going to watch it at home. So that was for me, very exciting. Another thing that was very exciting is that in front of all 6 Star Wars movies, George Lucas is not the sequel trilogy, but the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy, they have reinstated the 20th Century Fox logo with the fanfare, the extended, the widescreen fanfare. You know, the snare drum or the drums. You know, that had been missing from the Star Wars movies. And if you grow up like me, an old geek, an OG, an original geek, the Star Wars films, the Fox widescreen fanfare are just as much a part of the film. It's like how it gets you into the whole thing. It sets the table, as it were. Disney has put those back on the films. Now, there are a lot of people who would be like, well, Rob, the actual visual 20th Century Fox logo is the new logo. It's not the old classic logo. I understand. I get that. But it's still the 20th Century Fox logo. They did not go back and put the original 1977 logo in front of Star Wars. I get that. But you know what? Happy to see 20th Century Fox. Happy to see the logo. Happy to see this Fox fanfare in front of the films, because that's part of the movie. Now, as Elizabeth pointed out to me, interestingly, Disney movies are not the only movies that are on Disney Plus. There is at least one Fox film that I can confirm beyond the Star Wars movies. Doe, a deer, a female. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. The Sound of Music, which is a G-rated Fox film. I think it's G-rated. Directed by, of course, Robert Wise, who directed Star Trek The Motion Picture, celebrating its 40th anniversary next month, is on Disney Plus. Now, it's only in HD. It's not in HDR, Dolby Vision, or anything like that. But it is there, which is very interesting. Now, also, a lot of people have talked about how Disney, there's a lot of hubbub. Even I bitched and moaned and complained about how Disney was going to be altering their classic movies, specifically The Black Crows and Dumbo, and the Siamese cat sequence in Lady and the Tramp. People have talked about that no longer can you say, "We are Siamese, if you please. We are Siamese, if you don't please." Like that was going to be a bad thing. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen, gentle beings, kind people of all over the world, both Lady and the Tramp and Dumbo are available unaltered on Disney Plus. Unaltered, which is something that I was unaware of. Now, what's very cool in the details segment, when you go to their website and you look up the movies, and there is a section that says details, and you look in, let me read you what the details for Dumbo say. Meet Dumbo. Mrs. Jumbo's sweet little baby mind charms all who see him until it's discovered that he has huge floppy ears. With the support of his best friend, Timothy Q. Mouse, Dumbo soon learns that his spectacular ears make him unique and special, allowing him to soar to fame as the world's only flying elephant. Contains tobacco depictions. By the way, there's a lot of that. A lot of the Disney movies have to say contains tobacco depictions for parents. But this is my favorite part, and I think this is the most important part. This is on the descriptions for both Dumbo and Lady and the Tramp. This program is presented as originally created. It may contain, quote, outdated cultural depictions. Now, I know it's not a big deal, but it is a huge deal. The fact that Disney is owning their historical legacy, and it may contain outdated cultural depictions. I don't know who came up with that, what would you call it, nomenclature? Cultural depictions, outdated cultural depictions. I don't know how many lawyers had to come up with that, but kudos to you. I mean, I thought that was, rather than edit those movies, put them out and just say, you know what? We will own these movies for what they are, and we will say it may contain outdated cultural depictions. We're not your parents. We're not bringing you up. We are presenting our product the way it was originally created, and we will say, hey, parents, if you want to look into what your kids are going to watch, here you go. So that blew me away. That is both on Lady and the Tramp and on Dumbo. Cooler heads prevailed. There was no editorial on those. By the way, I didn't sit down and watch them to make sure those scenes are still intact. I would assume they are, but that is a huge deal. And I give it up for Disney for doing that. Amazing. So unbelievable. Now, look, today everyone's talking about, my God, I couldn't get on to Disney Plus today. Well, what'd you expect? You know, the opening day. It's opening day. The crowds are there. It's like whenever you have an opening day, just because it's virtual doesn't mean that everybody who has Disney Plus or every Star Wars fan isn't trying to watch The Mandalorian. So there was a bottleneck this morning. What was really interesting, so last night when I found out Disney Plus went online, I watched it on my computer, no problem at all. This morning, I wanted to show Elizabeth, again, could not download the Disney Plus app immediately. It took a while. And I had to ask Alexa to find it for me. And when I finally did, downloaded the app, set it up, put my password in, my name, all that kind of stuff, I couldn't get into the app. Now, by this afternoon, Elizabeth could. She watched a documentary on Imagineers. I watched a little bit of the the debut Jeff Goldblum show, which is the first episode's about sneakers, which I thought was pretty cool. I didn't watch the whole thing, but pretty cool anyway. I really enjoyed it. What I saw, I'm very impressed. I think the Disney app is great. So enough of the Disney commercial. By the way, I'm not being paid. I have to say, very impressed with the app. But here's where I was telling Mike Bodden this earlier. I love physical media. I love buying it. I love having it. Most recently, Ted Van Dyne, a fan of mine, he didn't just get me the Black Hole when it was released last month off the Disney Movie Club. He had to get it for me again because the first release had a mistake in it. You couldn't get the overture, John Barry's great overture, in the Christmas season of 1979. Two films, Star Trek The Motion Picture and The Black Hole, both had overtures. They were two of the last movies that ever did. Well, if you go to Disney Plus, it's not in 4K, I don't think. Someone did. You know what? I cannot confirm this, But I was told today that the black hole is actually in 4K, but I don't know. It might be. If it is, amazing. But when you watch the black hole, it starts with the overture. Now, I got this Blu-ray disc last month, and Ted, thank you for getting it for me. I also got 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Both of those movies are available on Disney Plus. I probably have in my collection 100 different Disney movies on disc put out by Disney. They did a fantastic job with physical media for a long time. But I realized as I was looking at Disney Plus, I'm like, you know what? I don't need them in my collection anymore. I don't. And as a matter of fact, even the Star Wars films and Sound of Music, which I got for Christmas 2 years ago, I really realized that Disney Plus is a physical media killer. Now, I understand. I know a lot of you people are going to be going, "Hey, Rob, I love physical media too. All of my discs, all of the cult titles and the Criterion titles, and who knows when they're going to be pulled off physical or off streaming services, and you'll never see them again." But the fact is, for the most part, nobody really wants to pull media off their servers. Disney is going to eventually put up everything, because they only have a finite amount of stuff, and then the new stuff that they make. But what they've made, the Disney brand, goes all the way back to the 20s. Steamboat Willie, the first animated feature that they made, Snow White, in the late 30s. I don't think they're going to be pulling anything off anytime soon, and it's all there. And I think to myself, like, yeah, I've got all 4 Toy Story movies on physical media, but now at the touch of a button, I can sit in bed and just zip through them. And by the way, the navigation is great. If you want to get into just a space battle mood and watch all the space battles on all the Star Wars movies, you can. You can just go back and forth, and when it's working after this initial onslaught, it's really a great website. Now, I am not even being paid for this. I just keep talking about it, but I realized that for the very first time, I was like, Star Wars, Dolby Vision, 4K, Atmos. They don't make those physical discs, but they're on Disney Plus. So where am I at? Yes, did they change Greedo firing first? Yeah, they didn't change it back to the original and best way of presenting it. They now apparently he says, I don't know what even, it's some word. I mean, they changed it again. Like, people, just put it back. Make Han Solo smart and good and capable again. Greedo already threatened his life over my dead body. That's the idea. That's why he can kill him. It's not murder. It's self-defense. So anyway, but Disney Plus did make me realize physical media, I'm going to hang on to it. And I know there's a lot of people that will. I love physical media. Plus, I like buying it. I like having it. I like unwrapping it. I like just putting discs in alphabetizing them. I like the whole idea of it. You can touch the art that you love. But Disney Plus made me realize even the Star Wars discs that how many times? I even wrote an article right before Phantom Menace came out. Chris Gore published a Star Wars collector's magazine, and I wrote an article 20 years ago called Buying Star Wars, about how many times I bought Star Wars up to that point. And you know what? How many times have I bought Star Wars since? Aside from, say, 3D discs, there are no 3D streams on Disney Plus yet. But, man, I'll tell you, I looked at this and I'm just like, well, whatever. Crazy. Now, The Mandalorian, the first Star Wars live-action TV show. What did I think of The Mandalorian? I bet you guys want to know. Well, before, I've got two chats from Mark C. Mark Chure says, I think the upcoming Kenobi series should be like Pale Rider. A town in trouble and a lone man comes to stop those causing trouble. In 1987, I had a Powell Peralta Waylander board with Ratbones brand wheels and trucks. That board was big as a pier. You know what? I mean, I had more of they were more in my day, the boards were wider and they were more like surfboards, and obviously the wheels were much bigger. And rather than do as many stunts, I went to school. I rode my skateboard to and from school, believe it or not. And but yeah, Powell Peralta, you know what? Still to this day, Dogtown and Z Boys, one of my favorite documentaries, and Lords of Dogtown. I mean, people always talk about um, the performance of the Joker, you know, but Skip Engblom, come on, how good was he as Skip Engblom in Lord's Dogtown? Anyway, yes, that is true. The boards were different back then. Life was different. Anyway, so let's see. Before I get into what I thought about The Mandalorian, I have so many letters to read, gigantic amounts of letters. And the first letter I have to read, which if you haven't gone to the website, you probably already saw it, but I got to find it. Guess who wrote a letter, and a letter that I have yet to read? That's right, ladies and gentlemen, Willow Yang, our own Willow Yang, wrote me another letter, and I can't, you got to love. And what did Willow write about? The Joker, or just Joker. Willow Yang saw Joker. So I'm just going to get right into this. Greetings, Rob. After finally having seen Joker last Sunday, I'm sending over my thoughts on the movie. I will say right off the top that I really enjoyed Joker. Now, I don't consider the movie to be a masterpiece. It didn't exactly change my life, and I won't consider it a snub if it misses out on a Best Picture nomination come the Oscars. However, it is a beautiful film that, in spite of the dark subject matter, is vivid and vibrant and saturated with color. Of course, Joaquin Phoenix is magnificent. He made the movie, and I was riveted every moment that he was on screen. I don't know if there were any effects done on him, but he looks like he's undergone a significant physical transformation for the role. He expresses himself not just through his face, but his entire body. He slouches and drags his feet in the beginning. He is upright and spry at the end. He twitches, he dances, he contorts. He is childlike at times. He is fragile and pathetic. He is seething with rage and frustration. He is ferocious and chilling. And while I understand your criticism of this iteration of the Joker lacking the capability to go toe-to-toe against the Caped Crusader, that did not bother me for two reasons. Firstly, the movie, in spite of the title, isn't really about the Joker. It's about Arthur and his gradual metamorphosis into the titular character. It was clear to me that he was learning throughout the story, slowly figuring things out and honing his craft, and it was only at the end does he reach the final stage of his evolution to fully emerge as the Joker. Secondly, and more importantly, ever since the first teaser, I knew that the movie wasn't going to be a typical comic book story. I was prepared for something that was Joker-esque, that was going to explore how such a person might emerge in our world by taking elements from Batman lore without necessarily giving us the actual Joker per se. The Joker was not going to fall into a vat of acid because that would be ridiculous in real life. I thought it was ingenious that his laugh was explained as being an involuntarily and apparently real pathological condition. I would have been fine if this Joker did not survive the end of the movie, even if that meant he'd never face off against Batman. I just wanted a good character study, and I was satisfied in that regard. Joker is certainly not a perfect movie. Probably my biggest issue is that I felt it was a bit heavy-handed at times, and in the first half, a lot of the antagonists in the film were pretty generic. A gang of unruly youths, a trio of chauvinistic morons, an a-hole co-worker, and a condescending elitist rendition of Thomas Wayne. I guess one way of looking at it is that the story was being told from Arthur's point of view, and that was how he perceived the other characters. I also felt that the movie beat me over the head a bit with its depiction of just how horrible Arthur's life was. I found some of the plot points at the beginning to be a little predictable. I knew that Arthur was going to get beaten up multiple times, get fired from his job, and lose his health care because the story requires that his life falls apart. Arthur's mental issues were literally spelled out for the audience in his journal entries. I preferred when the film took a defter approach in depicting his troubles, such as the scene where he was observing the other comedians and laughing at the parts where nobody else was, and the laughing fit that he suffers on the bus, where he was clearly in pain and fighting against his own body. I will briefly discuss the controversy surrounding Joker and its supposed sympathetic portrayal of a killer. Having seen the movie now, I personally don't understand the connection to, quote, incel violence that some in the media have made. I never felt that any of Arthur's hatred and rage was stemmed out of sexual frustration or resentment towards women. To me, the message of the film was blatantly one about income inequality and class warfare, the stewing hatred of the downtrodden towards the unsympathetic upper class, and the broken system that often allows people to fall through the cracks. If the movie had come out during the 2008 recession and Occupy Wall Street, I think that all the think pieces would have probably been very different. I cannot help but find it a little ironic that the controversy surrounding Joker has now led to some people applauding it for being anti-politically correct, when the main takeaway message I got from the movie is the need for greater investment into social programs, particularly healthcare. When it comes to violence, I personally found Joker to be much tamer than what some people in the media have made it out to be. The film is rated 14A here in Canada, which means adult supervision required for children under the age of 14. It is our version of a hard PG-13 or a soft R. There was only one particularly gruesome act where Arthur exacts vengeance on an ex-coworker by stabbing him to death with a pair of scissors. However, the violence in the aforementioned scene and throughout the entire movie was never gratuitous or excessive. It was not made to look titillating or overly gory. It was very mundane. It was realistic. It was necessary for the story. The movie for me was much more depressing than disturbing. I'm watching someone going on a slow downward descent into madness, and in the end, it is evil that ultimately triumphs. Joker is very much a tragedy. It is a cautionary tale about our society and how we choose to treat our weakest and most vulnerable members. I will conclude my thoughts with some observations on the incredible financial success of Joker. I've had the fortunes of watching the movie with two friends from high school. It is the reason why I was so late in seeing it. It was difficult for us to find a time where everyone can meet up. Neither of my friends are big comic book fans. In fact, one of them, after the movie, asked me about the significance of the scene where the Waynes got shot because she wasn't familiar with Batman's origins. Both of them still really enjoyed Joker, however, in particular Joaquin Phoenix's performance, the plot twists and ambiguity of certain events, and the commentary on healthcare and funding for the mentally ill. I've heard several of my colleagues discussing the movie at work and all of their theories on what actually happened, what was real and what wasn't. On the surface, Joker didn't look like a particularly accessible movie to the general audience. It isn't an action-packed spectacle like Avengers, but a slow character piece with some heavy subject matter. Yet it appears to have touched a nerve with moviegoers with a message that, while a bit clunky and heavy-handed at times, is nevertheless highly relevant and universal. It is a movie that manages to successfully reflect society and express our current sentiments. Is it just me? Or is it getting crazier out there? Best regards, Willow. Well, this is why Willow has her own section on my website, Willow Talk, which, by the way, is on the Burnettwork.net if you want to go back and read any of her earlier letters. Willow is a treasure. Willow is a joy. I love Willow's letters. She nails it. She and I, as I've said before, we definitely park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. So, Willow, thank you for this amazing letter. What a great summation of Joker. And I think, more importantly, not only is this a great review, but what she does is she sort of codifies why everybody is responding to this movie. It's because it's about all of us. It's about income inequality. It's about not being able to get our proper health care. It's about all of those things that every one of us deal with. We might not become a homicidal maniac like Arthur Fleck and become, of course, the mastermind that the Joker is and take on the Batman, but all of Arthur's frustrations were easily identified with, and that's why people love the Joker. That's why it's going to make $1 billion at the box office. Willow, thank you for, once again, a lovely letter. Thanks very much. Myth Dusters is here. Do you think Disney Plus will take media off and use the Disney Vault like they did on VHS DVD? Well, you know what, Myth Dusters? Here's what I think Disney Plus is all about. It doesn't do them any good anymore to have anything in the vault, because the whole point is that families were waiting to get these Disney classics. We're going to vault something so we can make it more valuable when we release it in 20 years. Nope. I think what Disney has realized is their library, their legacy is, first of all, timeless. Every kid will find their way into something Disney, whether it's Pixar, whether it's Star Wars, whether it's Marvel, forever. There's kids don't care about what's in the vault. They only care about what's there. And the fact is, what Disney has done, you know, you go into Netflix, and it was really interesting. As I was scanning through Disney Plus, I just kind of felt joy. And maybe that's because there aren't movies like maybe Taxi Driver or something like that, which I feel joy when I see that. But collectively, when you see all of the Disney, the way they've designed it, they've got like the video boxes, or they've all got pieces of artwork for every one of their movies. And collectively, when you scroll through them, by the way, try this. When the movies come up, it's featured. But what I would implore everyone to do is just try this as an experiment. Go up to where it says movies, and in their pull down menu, it's like A to Z alphabetically. So all of the movies that are available on Disney Plus will be you'll look down at them, and then you scroll through them alphabetically. I defy anyone to do that and not find something that makes you smile, because Disney is irrevocably linked to all of our childhoods. So to scroll down their list of films, there is some sense memory for, look, I say this knowing I'm from the West. I'm a white cis male. I was privileged that my parents took me to Disney films. I get all that. I do. Saw them on TV, whatever. And perhaps, you know, and it's true, you have to have grown up with them. You have to have grown up and been lucky enough to be part of the human race where you could grow up with access to these movies. I recognize all of that. But be that as it may, that's my only experience. I can't go by any other experience. And it is a wonderful thing to scroll down through all those movies, and you do feel joyous. It is a fun thing. JBKB24 sent in a super chat. Thank you for supporting the channel. Now that I'm going head to head with Christian Harloff and John Campea on Dark Side, Light Side, and let's face it, come on, you guys, who was alive? Who was a Star Wars fan before they were? I was. Just saying. So anyway, The Mandalorian. I suppose I should probably. I'm not gonna spoil The Mandalorian. I think it's unfair. There are people around the world right now, even that are watching this show, that have no access to seeing The Mandalorian right now. So it's not my desire to spoil The Mandalorian. How did I feel about the first episode of Mandalorian? We talked about this on the John Campea show today. It was good. I enjoyed it. I was interested in how they were able to produce it. But first of all, Jon Favreau wrote it. I really enjoyed all of the cast. I think that everyone knows, perhaps you don't know, but you should know, Dave Filoni, who's a fan favorite because he has been the Star Wars impresario when it comes to the animated shows, and he's done a lot for Star Wars, directed this episode. And I felt it's his first time directing live action at this scale, and I felt that was painfully obvious. It's not that it was bad. It felt very like a first effort. And I felt that it was, I was surprised. You know what it felt like? it felt like a live action translation of an animated episode. Not a whole lot of depth there, not a whole lot of there was a lot of everything in it I liked. Werner Herzog was great. Carl Weathers, it was great to see him. But I felt, and now I don't know if this is true or not, maybe I'll have to wait till I read The Making of the Mandalorian. I really felt like this first episode, which is short, it's like 40 minutes, felt like a pilot presentation. Like they made this episode. Jon Favreau took this idea to Kathleen Kennedy. She said, after listening to him, he convinced her, and she said, you should work with Dave Filoni on this. They got together and they created this, but Disney was unconvinced. So Jon Favreau said, look, I want to do an entire show based on the technology I've been working with on Jungle King, and I've seen it refined on Lion King. Pardon me, the Jungle Book. He directed Jungle Book, saw that technology refined, used it on Lion King, was like, we can make a Star Wars show and keep the budget down. So this first episode of The Mandalorian, to me, felt like it was a proof of concept. Kind of like the way we did the short sci-fi film Axanar, Prelude to Axanar, or the 3-minute scene that I directed, Axanar, the Vulcan scene, which I did to prove that we could make a film with high production values, but we could shoot it for $15,000 on one day with 120 by green screen, 20 foot by 20 foot green screen. The Mandalorian felt like that to me. There were because everything in it, first of all, is old school Star Wars. Whether you see the Gonk droid, whether you see the aliens in the bar initially, but like we were talking about before, there's a character, one of the Mandalorian's target in the beginning. I found that character to be like really cliche. It was very much an animated character for me. He seemed out of place. The Mandalorian, it wasn't perfect. I really liked The Mandalorian. I really liked watching it. I love the fact that, like in the Clone Wars series, they were expanding the Mandalorian lore. I thought all that was really, really, really interesting. I felt like the Mandalorian himself is not very well defined. As a matter of fact, a lot of the characters weren't, but I liked seeing parts of the Star Wars universe we haven't seen. So I really liked The Mandalorian. I did not think it was great. That was really good. I enjoyed it. I don't know what Gilbert thought of it, but it struck me as something. It was the very beginning of something. Now, I think there's a reason why Disney Plus decided to release this. To me, this was sort of it was almost an extended teaser for the series. It was set up. It was really interesting. You learn all about the characters, the world, the milieu, and you're into it. But I think this Friday's episode, the first episode of the series that is beyond this proof of concept, is where it's all going to really begin. That's just a thought. This was just sort of easing us into it all, and it was fine. Taika Waititi's character, IG-11, loved the character, loved watching that droid move and how it all worked. I really liked that. I could see a relationship developing there. I thought that the characterization of the Mandalorian was all over the place. At first, he's this incredible badass, and then they have him trying to, let's just say, mount a steed and have a problem doing it, which I was like, I would think that a bounty hunter that's traveled around the galaxy could pretty much use any kind of transportation, and if he had to ride a space horse, he could do it. So there was a lot of stuff in it that was like that it very much felt like an animated episode. I thought it was directed, there wasn't a lot of flourishes, but it was, Filoni was a new director. So I don't fault him for that. And I'm looking to see how it develops. I think he's doing another episode later in the season. I'll be curious to see how he's worked on what he's been doing. But certainly a very respectable first episode. I enjoyed watching it. I felt a lot of. I didn't feel like, that sucked. I really liked watching it. I liked what happened. I just felt like it seemed it needed to be a little punchier. It needed to have a bit more coverage, so you could do more editorially. I thought the editing felt to me a little slow. Like I would have taken out 10 frames off most of all the exits, especially edits, especially in the action scenes. But it wasn't, it wasn't bad. I certainly enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to the series. I can't really say more than that. I love the way it ended. Very intriguing. We'll see where it all winds up. I don't know yet. Willow Yang says, I don't understand the stereotype of Asians having giant buck teeth, but I crack up every time you sing We're Siamese, if you please. You know what's funny? Have you not seen Lady and the Tramp? I've never understood the buck-toothed alien Asian stereotype myself. I mean, I've always thought of especially like Japanese and Brits. I grew up in a house where my mom was obsessed with our teeth. We had to go to the orthodontists all the time, and if it wasn't headgear and if it wasn't braces, or if it was like I had a retainer that had spikes on it to stop my tongue from pushing out my front teeth. I mean, it was basically I had a childhood of torture, orthodontic torture. And it's always been funny that you see more and more, like in Asian countries and in the UK, that was not such a big deal. Maybe it was really an American thing. But the buck teeth thing, I guess I don't know where it came from. Maybe it came from people not having orthodontic work. I don't know, but it's very funny. But I always thought in Lady and the Tramp, I always saw the cats as being villains. I mean, as somebody who's grown up, I grew up in a cat household with my crazy cat mom. She's a crazy cat lady. I never saw that scene as being racist. Siamese cats were, to me, a breed, and it was more about the cats, how cats are villains. Cats will torment you. Cats will withhold their love. And the fact that you had these two Siamese cats that, first of all, were beautiful cats that were gorgeous looking. They knew they could get one over on everyone else. I never saw it as being necessarily racist, but perhaps their facial expressions or the way they're drawn, or the fact that, I guess they're from Siam. Isn't that where the King and I is from? I don't know. But I never saw it that way. But who am I to say, as a white cis male? I'm, of course, the most evil kind of human being in the world. But I just saw that. I've always seen that song as being a function of cats. That cats are basically assholes. Even though I love cats, I grew up with them. I love that they're like a dog. You can kick a dog around, the dog will come back, but a cat will not put up with your BS. And I've always loved cats, and I've always believed that cats rule the world. And I've loved that depiction all the time. Perhaps that means I'm not as enlightened as I should be, but I'm with you. Alexander Wilson says, trivia, what organization created traditional streaming and the company that created ESPN Plus and Disney Plus? That's a good question. I don't know. I would say something like DARPA or something like that. Somebody that created the actual internet. I don't know. I do know that Disney bought a streaming company back in 2017 in order to build Disney Plus, the same streaming company that serviced HBO and what have you. But I don't know. What is the answer? What is the answer, Alexander? I do not know. Anyway. So, Willow, I want to thank you for your letter. What a great letter. Let's see. Oh, this is a good question. And since we're talking Mandalorian, here's another good letter. And I like this letter. This letter comes from B. Sweaty. Hello, Rob. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the great divide amongst Star Wars fans. I will give you my stance. I watched the original trilogy in theaters opening day. Hang on one second. Hey, Elizabeth, someone's at the front door knocking. Just saying. Hello, Rob. I just want to get your thoughts on the great divide amongst Star Wars fans. I will give you my stance. I watched the original trilogy in theaters on opening day as a young adult, and I was delighted when I was able to take my son to see the prequels opening day. When Disney purchased Lucasfilm, I was excited to get new Star Wars. I saw Rogue One, I saw The Force Awakens, and The Last Jedi, each opening day. I had mixed feelings on The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens. I skipped seeing Solo on opening day and waited for the DVD release. After seeing Solo from home, I was disappointed that I let my love or hate feelings for Disney's Star Wars hold me back from seeing Solo on the big screen. Let me say, I love all Star Wars, some more than others, I admit, but they still have a place in my heart. I love the animated Clone Wars and Rebels also. And while the sequel trilogy hasn't been my favorite, they're not all bad either. There are things in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi I loved, and a few things I really didn't like. I really want Rise of Skywalker to be great. My fingers are crossed. I believe most Star Wars fans want great Star Wars. My question is, what do you believe has caused the rift in the fandom? Why can't we all just get along? What do you believe has caused these subgroups in the fandom? And what do you think could fix it, if anything? Thanks for all you do for us, your fans. Stay sweaty, my friend. Be sweaty. Wow. Well, boy, that's a big question. Here's in a nutshell. It's very funny. It's a very funny place to be in because 20 years ago, I remember how fandom was when Phantom Menace came out. Star Wars fans were perplexed. I lived in a world, well, even though I've come out and said Return of the Jedi was very disappointing to me, I lived in a world where Star Wars changed not only my life, but the lives of so many other people. As a 10-year-old boy who saw Star Wars, and then after Star Wars, seeing shows like The Making of Star Wars and getting the Star Wars sketchbook. Because of Star Wars, in the wake of Star Wars, the art of movie making was showcased even to kids like myself, which was never the case. That had never happened before. And it was really interesting to live in a world where suddenly movie making, something that nobody could understand because of Star Wars, because of the magic of Star Wars, perhaps the most magical film ever made in terms of visual effects, was demystified for a whole generation of people by desperately wanting to know how it was done. And there was no other movie that had a special that Mark Hamill hosted, The Making of Star Wars, that in order to get into that, it opened showing us clips from movies like Thief of Baghdad. And when Star Wars came out, in the wake of Star Wars, I think an entire generation of people were influenced by the magic of movies, special effects, storyboarding, miniature work. I mean, everything. Physical effects like building full-scale robots. Star Wars had a profound effect beyond just watching a movie because it became a part of our culture, part of the DNA of our culture. And I know it certainly was for me. I did not consider movie making as something I could ever actually do until I saw things like The Making of Star Wars, because I made models, and I suddenly would get a Super 8 camera, and I was reading magazines like Cinemagic, which was a publication of Starlog about how do you make movies. And it was an amazing place to be. Is everything okay? Oh, it was an amazing place to be, to live in a world where suddenly movie making was demystified for the masses. And it's hard to explain to people what Star Wars did in terms of firing the imagination, not just for boys, but for girls too, for everybody, for parents relationships with their children. Star Wars was something that was only associated with great things. What was interesting was the Star Wars trilogy, the original trilogy, was sacrosanct. I mean, they were beyond criticism. They delivered the goods, and I might whinge on about Return of the Jedi, but regardless, for the most part, critically, sure, people like myself might have felt disappointed by it, but you know what? Even me, I'm hard pressed to find fault with the final scene where Luke confronts the Emperor and Vader it all led up to something like that, and it ended well. So the idea of Star Wars being anything less than superlative or anything less than making you feel wonderful was, in my life, at least from 1977 to 1999, which was 22 years, Star Wars only brought the greatest of joy. Now, we might have bitched and moaned and complained about Star Wars early video games or whatever, but even when Star Wars was re-injected into pop culture in the early 90s with first the Thrawn Trilogy and second the Heir to the Empire Dark Horse series, and as you moved forward and there was the Shadows of the Empire multimedia event, even then Star Wars was something that was great. It was only in 1999 where people saw the Phantom Menace and were like, what? Like the greatness of Star Wars, this unassailable thing that only brought joy, suddenly left people cold. Certainly, and I won't get into the reasons why I think that is, but I think it's, I mean, it all really comes down to George Lucas. But it proved to me that as much as I love George Lucas as a filmmaker, THX 1138, American Graffiti, Star Wars, and of course, producing the Indiana Jones films, the movies that George Lucas was making, especially in the first three films, that he thought he was making were not the movies that got made. He thought he was making children's movies from the get-go because he based them on his feelings about Flash Gordon serials, but the world embraced them as movies for everybody that was about the kid inside everyone. But George Lucas didn't get that. I honestly believe this is my own theory. So when he made Phantom Menace, he embraced the fact that rather than make a timeless fairy tale that appealed to everybody, he made a movie that was specifically targeted at kids. And it was not sophisticated because he did not have his collaborative team. Everybody was telling him what he wanted to hear because people thought, oh my God, George Lucas, you had people working on Phantom Menace that grew up with Star Wars that were never going to cross George. So we had to deal with the fact that the prequel trilogy came out and it really wasn't very satisfying to old school fans. New fans, there were people that grew up, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith were the first Star Wars movies they saw in the theater. So that was very impactful for people. So there are people that love those films. And of course, they hit you at different times in your life. But even if you didn't like the prequel trilogy, I've always said I think they're bad movies, but I think they're good Star Wars, if that makes any sense. The mythology, the lore, the story that's being told, really interesting. I just think George Lucas was a man who had forgotten, he'd lost a little bit of touch with what it was like, to be the man on the street. He needed to go like into 7-Eleven and buy a Slurpee occasionally. I'm sure he didn't do that. But my only experience with George Lucas was once in my life when he was in Sydney working. He came down to visit the set of Superman Returns, and he was just a doting father. He reminded me of, you'd never know. If he hadn't made Star Wars, you'd be looking at him going, wow, his kid's like, when do we get to see Superman, Dad? I don't know. I don't know. We're going to see them soon. I'm not sure. I mean, he was just a guy, and he didn't know. And I think what's happened now is that there is a perception that this thing that people grew up loving their whole lives, Star Wars, of course, not a perception, a reality that it's been bought by corporate interests, which it has. Now, everybody always wanted to make money from Star Wars, but I think it was more palatable when you had one man behind it. Star Wars always came back to George Lucas. Sure, he had collaborators, but it was still his. It was one dude's. So you could convince yourself that in your mind, you were seeing the vision of one man. But now that Star Wars has been purchased by Disney, a corporate entity, Disney, which, by the way, in my life, what I find so funny about the whole thing is back in the day, when I was growing up, Disney made these movies like The Apple Dumpling Gang or Candle Shoe, all of which are, and The Apple Dumpling Gang Rides Again. They were making their live action output was for kids. They were kids movies that your parents would take you to that weren't like cartoons. They weren't animated, but they were one step above. And so Disney was not some powerhouse. I remember when they tried to, with Black Hole, Black Cauldron, and Tron, they tried to go for more adult audiences with varying degrees of success. I mean, with Black Hole, I don't think anyone's going to say, by the way, it's funny, you go back and you look at Black Hole now, it's a very interesting movie. Clearly, it's a ripoff of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but it's an interesting version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It's interesting, but it's just different. And I think the reason being now is that Star Wars, first of all, there's an immediate prejudice against Star Wars now because it's owned by a corporation. You've removed the creator. You've removed the author from the equation. So this idea that Star Wars is no longer pure, it's been tainted by the corporate interests of the filthy, money-grubbing corporations such as Disney. Well, that's true, but that isn't any different than any other movie that's been made over the last almost 100 years in Hollywood. But because we've had this illusion of one man, George Lucas, who created this franchise, as if he did it with no one else's help. But anyway, so there's this shift, and our natural inclination is to think, oh, Disney is evil. And what's funny is when I looked at Disney Plus, you know what I was thinking the whole time? I'm like, wow, I only wish the people that created this app and Disney Plus were as smart. I wish they had done CBS All Access. I wish the people, the corporate overlords that oversee Star Trek, are as smart about how they present Star Trek, because CBS All Access, that app, they didn't even take into consideration surround or Dolby Vision or 4K. Are you kidding? I had to watch Star Trek Discovery via Amazon so I could hear it in surround. But Disney Plus, those guys did it right. They did it right. And I was thinking last night, I'm like, boy, I wish somebody cared about Star Trek. I wish somebody paid as much attention to Star Trek as the people that are making Disney Plus paid attention to Star Wars. I mean, they certainly want it to be that way for their shows. I mean, but they're not really taking the time. But I think that's the disconnect. There's this weird manufactured thought in the minds of fans that Disney Star Wars is suddenly, it's corrupted Star Wars. Star Wars has been infected by capitalism because Disney owns it. On the flip side, there would be no Star Wars now if Disney didn't buy it. I'm not convinced that George Lucas would, after the prequel trilogy, why bother? I mean, sure, he wants to keep the merchandising train going, but hey, Star Wars lasted. If it only lasted from 1977 to 2005, so be it. Let's make money on video games. Jedi Fallen Order comes out Friday. I mean, why not do that? But I think that what's happened is this comfort food, Star Wars, has suddenly become not perfect. The entire franchise is like having a hero that you find out that hero has a feet of clay. And hey, it's a corporate entity. And what's really interesting, I think the journey of the sequel trilogy, Force Awakens, Rise of Skywalker, or Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, is a telltale. It's going to be a cautionary tale, ultimately a cautionary tale, about artistic and corporate interests, and how an IP, an intellectual property that is so beloved, what happens when corporate interests, the idea of a corporation acquiring an intellectual property that's beloved, tries to make more of that intellectual property based on the needs of a corporation. It doesn't work. It won't work, because the impetus to create great stories and great characters has never been about money. Sure, in Hollywood, they always want to make money, but really, first and foremost, you can ask any filmmaker. No filmmaker sits down and says, I'm just in this I just want to make cash. They can say what they want. Even if they tell you that, they're lying. Anybody that wants to make movies, you want to make a great movie. At the end of the day, the whole point about making movies is to have an auditorium full of people that sit down and love what you've made. Now, if they love what you made, you'll make money. But the ultimate desire, movies are they're too much of a pain in the ass. It's way easier to make movies in any other profession in the world than it is. It is easier to make a buck working at 7-Eleven on a minimum wage than it is to make, say, a movie, because there's no guarantee. And you spend years working on films and you never know where they're going to wind up. You just don't know. So nobody wants to make a movie that doesn't work. But a corporate mandate, they'll never understand how to make movies. A corporation can't make movies, so they have to hire people that do. And then what they do is they try and limit the filmmakers. They tell them, no. Here are our corporate interests. Here's what we need from your movie. Well, that undercuts the whole purpose of making a film. That undercuts the whole purpose of telling a story, and it undercuts the whole purpose of creating characters. Corporate interests just making money. If a corporation is telling you, here's what we need out of the movie you're making, you'll never win. You cannot win. And that's where Disney is right now. Mandalorian, and I'm curious to see where it goes. Right now, I got to tell you, I'm 50-50. I'm 50-50. I thought Mandalorian was going to be the great Star Wars hope. It was good. And I think as we see all 8 episodes, it's probably going to wind up being great, I would assume. But it's not the slam dunk I thought it was. Still good, but not the slam dunk I thought it was. Because ultimately, when your corporate overlords are telling you what to do, see, studios used to pick, you'd pick tools, you'd pick talent. You're like, okay, I'm going to hire these guys and girls or whoever, and I assume, based on their track record, they're going to give us something that we'll then give to the marketing department, and they'll sell it and we'll make money. You never used to have the corporate overlordship of these movies. They didn't have their hands in it. We didn't have corporations. We didn't have Ivy League educated creative executives at studios who thought they knew how to make movies more than the people that made the films. Yeah, they would pick people, and sometimes they would get involved, and certainly you had studio executives that had good instincts. But for the most part, it's the same is true of, if you're building a car, if you're in Detroit or wherever you are building a car, the people that run the company are not necessarily engineers. They might not know exactly how to run things. They're running the money, and they know they're building a product that will sell. But they don't sit there and get in the face of their designers and tell their designers what to do. Some do maybe, but for the most part, they don't. The problem with movie making is everybody thinks they can do it. Everybody has an opinion. And certainly when you're working at a corporate level and you have an Ivy League educated, you're an Ivy League educated business person, of course you know how to make movies. Why wouldn't you? I went to Harvard or Princeton or Yale or Stanford or wherever. Of course I know how to make movies. Well, you've never made a movie before. So what? Came from a good family. I was educated in the Ivy League. You know how much my education cost? Of course I can make movies. It's very interesting. And I think that what's happening is what you're dealing with in the long run culturally is you're dealing with the disillusionment of people that are coming to grips with the reality of life. In that the people that are now making Star Wars, we think Star Wars in our imaginations are it's a belief system. Star Wars is a belief system. And the people that now are running that belief system, they need to make money. You can believe all you want, but if I'm not making $1 billion a film, and what I need to do to make $1 billion a film is what my research has told me I need to do. Now they don't understand that ephemeral, unquantifiable aspect of what does it mean? How does it work? Why does Star Wars make so many people happy? Well, once you start trying to reduce it to a spreadsheet, you've already lost. And I think Rise of Skywalker, by the way, in the history of cinema, I don't think that there is a movie that's ever been like The Rise of Skywalker where corporate interests. Now, I'm not talking about a studio that might lose money. I'm talking about corporate interests that have a worldwide interest in the business of Star Wars, what it means in terms of ancillary markets and everything from Star Wars napkins to bed sheets, whatever the business of Star Wars is, theme parks, making people love Star Wars and continue to buy tchotchkes. I don't think in all of human history, and then certainly in the history of Hollywood, there has been a movie with more writing on it from a business standpoint than The Rise of Skywalker, ever. And by the way, part of the problem is everybody thinks that The Rise of Skywalker, if it's not if we were living on a planet that was being subjected to 10 years of nuclear winter, when Rise of Skywalker opens, the clouds would part, the radiation would go away, the sun would shine down, the oceans would no longer be polluted, and everybody would be frolicking in the fields. That's what people think The Rise of Skywalker is supposed to be. I'll bet you people don't even know. People watch Rise of Skywalker at Disney and they're thinking, wow, this movie did not turn water into wine, so it must not be I can't even imagine what it's like to be sitting in a room watching Rise of Skywalker. And if you don't feel that your soul was altered, the movie was good. I don't think people know if the movie's good or bad or not. I don't think they can tell. They show it to people, and I don't envy anyone. Anyway, this is long. The divide among Star Wars fans, simply put, Star Wars just isn't doing it for people the way it used to, and they want somebody to blame. I mean, that's in a nutshell. That's what they want. They want to feel like they felt when they watched Star Wars and Empire for the first time, or however it was. I honestly believe that. I do. Alexander Wilson asked the question, what organization created traditional streaming and the company that created ESPN Plus and Disney Plus? Alexander Wilson answers his own question by saying the answer is Major League Baseball, who streamed games in 2003 and started BAMTech that Disney brought to create ESPN and Disney Plus. That's very interesting. Isn't that strange that something that was created to stream sporting games or sporting events would wind up, but it's not a big leap. It makes sense. I mean, I buy that. Dan V900 says Filoni gets wrongly credited for expanding the Mandalorian lore. Karen Travis did it for her Republic Commando books, and he changed so much in his show that she quit writing them. It's unfortunate. Well, Dan V900, I believe that. I think that's probably true. And one of the great problems is I am always railing on about how much the people that are writing, nobody sat down. Anybody that wanted to write a Star Trek novel or a Star Wars novel or an alien novel or any tie-in fiction, before somebody's going to hire you to write a Buffy the Vampire Slayer novel, you would have already had to prove your chops within the licensed fiction market. But nobody gets into writing licensed fiction because they want to get rich writing Star Trek novels or Star Wars novels. They start writing these novels because they love the universe so much and they have stories to tell, and they already wanted to be novelists and storytellers, so that's what they do. So that's what I've discovered, is that some of the best tie-in fiction is also the best fiction, whatever that franchise is. I've read some of my favorite Star Trek stories are novels written by my favorite writers. Same with Star Trek. Star Wars is the same way. Like when I read the Thrawn Trilogy by Timothy Zahn, I didn't think it was the best thing in the world, but it was pretty damn good. I didn't know Timothy Zahn. I hadn't read what he'd written before. So yeah, it's incredible. Then you start expanding in your own mind. You're okay. I didn't know this. So Karen Tavis is expanding the Mandalorian lore. She has an idea, but the problem is that's no one else. She never got to sit down and sat with anybody. No one at Lucasfilm said, you know what, Karen, your Mandalorian lore is pretty interesting. Like, we've never actually sat down and developed it. We really like what you're doing, because there's nobody at Lucasfilm. There's nobody in any of these companies that are doing these kinds of things, because why would you? It's a tie-in novel. It's marketing. So, you're expanding the Mandalorian lore. Who are Mandalorians? I mean, you don't even say in the movie The Empire Strikes Back, where Boba Fett is introduced. Nobody knew what a Mandalorian was. It was never mentioned. No one said, Boba Fett's a Mandalorian. His father. I mean, all this other stuff came out of later because people made that shit up. What's ironic is in the Star Wars universe, so much of what we know was made up by other people outside of the movies. And you gotta take that into consideration. I don't think Sheev Palpatine, I don't think Sheev's first name was ever mentioned in a script. If you went to George Lucas and said, "Hey, George, where'd you get the name Sheev?" He'd be like, "Sheev? Sheev." He'd be like, "Who are you talking about?" So much of that stuff, you read the visual dictionaries, and it's an amalgamation of all kinds of craziness. And half of what Star Wars has been made up out of whole cloth. And so when Karen Tavis is doing it, cheers Mandalorian. Oh, it's Mandalorian armor. It's Boba Fett. What does that mean? There's nothing in Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi, which is the canonical appearances. And the special edition of Jedi has, you get that Boba Fett shot with his gun. He's like, that wasn't even in the original movie. So it's like, okay, wow, Boba Fett's in Jabba's palace. And we didn't know that. It's just all of that stuff is all changed and added later. And it's unfortunate. I did not know that about Karen Tavis in her Republic Commando books. But see, then Filoni's like, well, they're just in books. I can do whatever the hell I want because I'm the one setting the tone because I'm making the show. It's crazy. Rick Berg says, love your 2001 shirt. P.S. Any way of getting the soundtrack to Prelude to Axanar? Yes. The soundtrack to Prelude to Axanar, which is by Alex Bornstein, is amazing. And for donors, there was a CD produced. And I'm sure if you were to write Alec Peters or give him money, he'd be happy to take your money and send you a copy of the Prelude to Axanar CD. It is a great CD. Alex did a great job. I think it's 5 tracks, or heck, just email me at the website and I'll send it to you. I'll send you the files. If that's what you want, I can. As a matter of fact, I can send you 2 files that aren't on Prelude to Axanar. The wonderful Klingon Hymn. By the way, I'll tell you, if you do like Alex Bornstein's score for Prelude to Axanar, you can go to the website, theburnettwork.net, and hear 2 pieces of music that were going to be used in the Axanar feature film. One I asked him to write, and one that he was writing with Christian Gossett was still involved. I used them in 2 of the documentary pieces, one about the Ares kicking ass and the other about the Klingon battle scenes. One of them is the opening title music that I had Bornstein write, and one is a Klingon hymn where you'll read all about it. So if you go to theburnettwork.net and go to Deconstructing Axanar, if you watch the Ares kicks ass piece, and if you watch the Klingon battle sequences and their documentary pieces, at the end there are videos of a compilation of all the visual effect shots that I directed that Tobias Richter created that have 2 pieces of Axanar music you've never heard before. You can download those whole video pieces and cut out of that and use those 2 pieces of music that who knows if they'll ever be heard. I don't know. But I had one done for me, and one was a Klingon hymn that's amazing. So thanks for that, Rick. I appreciate that. So yeah. Squidward Tentacles. And you know what? You read Squidward Tentacles and you can't, come on, Watchmen, Do you think they'll ever make a Luke movie pre-episode 7, dark, gritty, deep, emotional, Logan-esque? De-age Mark Hamill like the Irishman? It would be insane. I don't think so. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they missed a huge opportunity by, I've said this before, Force Awakens, basically, it's like, hey, no time, 30 years have gone by, but no time has really passed. There's the First Order and the Resistance now. Nothing has really changed, unfortunately, but I wish it had. I wish it had. But it would be good. I mean, look, for everybody who doesn't understand, de-aging technology is hugely expensive, and it's very difficult to do. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not. It's very hard to do, as a matter of fact. So I don't know if you'd ever see that, but yeah, I would love to see that. Here's another Star Wars letter, since we're in on it. This one comes from Phil Atanasio, who says, "Hope all is well, Viceroy. The beard is coming in beautifully. Keep on growing." I have to say, speaking of the beard, I trimmed it yesterday. There was a lot of beard maintenance going on because it was a little unruly, and I'm quite happy with the results. I mean, what this makes me really want to do is really hit the gym and lose those 40 pounds and get all svelte, and because I bet I would look just like Sonny Crockett. Anyway, hope all is well, Viceroy. The beard is coming in beautifully. Keep on growing. I revisited Revenge of the Sith recently, and one scene has always lingered in my mind. The scene is when Anakin Skywalker goes through his Frankenstein monster makeover. I thought it was cool to see the medical droids work on him, installing the bionics and placing the mask on his face. The sound effect that went along with the mask application is, my opinion, one of the most subtle yet best in Star Wars. I love that sound effect, by the way. The part of the scene that never sat well with me is when the Emperor approaches Vader and softly asks, "Lord Vader, can you hear me?" And then asks about Padme. Vader asks about Padme. The Emperor lies to Vader, and shortly after absorbing the news, Vader exclaims, "No!" and through the Force destroys the laboratory, breaks out of the restraints, and then awkwardly steps away from the lab, just like Frankenstein's monster. When I first saw this movie almost 15 years ago, the tone of the interaction between the Emperor and Vader seemed off. Vader's reaction with shouting, "No!" as always felt weird and somewhat out of character for the newly christened Darth Vader. Since I generally enjoyed this movie, I set my feelings toward the scene aside, but it still kind of nagged at me. How do you feel about the scene? If it doesn't sit well with you, how would you have done it differently? Thanks in advance for helping me deal with this issue that has been lingering in my subconscious for almost 15 years. As always, to you and my brothers and sisters of the Post-Geek Singularity, keep on living the Lucky Tiger lifestyle. Phil, a.k.a. Marcel. Well, Phil, I think, there are a few things that I can find if I travel around the planet and find people of all shapes, sizes, colors, creeds, belief systems, what have you. Doesn't matter whether you're male, female, transgendered, straight, gay, non-gendered, an alien from another planet, whatever kind of gentle being you are. I think we can all agree that at the end of Revenge of the Sith, when Darth Vader finds out he probably or maybe killed Padme and screams, "No!" it's easily one of the most ridiculous and disappointing moments in the history of cinema. I really believe that. I think it's amazingly stupid. One of my favorite Darth Vader moments, if not my favorite Darth Vader moments, and it's subtle. And no, I'm not going to say when he wrecks shop in Rogue One, because Rogue One, let's face it, if it's not in Star Wars, Empire, or Jedi, and you're dealing with Vader, I think it's not real. It's the moment when the Millennium Falcon goes into hyperspace at the end of Jedi, at the end of Empire, when it's not supposed to work. And there's a moment where Vader is just staring out, and the Millennium Falcon has gone into hyperdrive. R2 fixed the hyperdrive. And Vader is looking out the window, and he just turns around, and he doesn't say anything, and he kind of whips his cape behind him. He clasps his hands behind his back, and he just walks away. He looks up and doesn't say anything. Because what is there to say? What is there to say? How much can he get more angry? No. But that moment when he walks away, to me, is peak Vader. It's peak, like, what are you going to do? Who else can I choke out? Well, no one. I'm dealing with a cosmic force that isn't going to let me go. I thought him screaming "no" was look, I get it. I understand George's feeling. How do you convey someone who's burned to a crisp, who's lost multiple limbs? He comes back to life in this crazy breathing apparatus. How do you cinematically convey to anybody, to the audience, how horrified and in pain our character is? Well, he stomps around like Frankenstein and says, "No." I get it. I get it. In George's mind, oh, they'll understand. They'll understand his pain. Well, we are looking at one of the most badass villains who's ever graced the silver screen, and we're like, come on, bruh. That is so not what Vader would do. Well, remember, he's just become Vader. He doesn't quite understand his surroundings. He doesn't get where he is. He probably thinks he's in a darkened room. He doesn't even understand he's in this gigantic breathing apparatus, this walking iron lung that keeps him alive. I think it's a really dumb scene. I think it was really ill-conceived, and I don't understand why Lucas would allow it. Of course, people are going to laugh at that. I mean, it's the combination of the no, it's all bad on every level. And I get it. You cannot. The problem with the prequel trilogy is full of moments like that you can never get past. You can never get past. It's like, why, Demi? Why you leave me? That's an Exorcist reference. I know it's a deep cut, but that's what I was thinking. But it's a bummer. It's a bummer. I mean, I don't like that scene. What happened to Vader in that scene? It's not good. Don't like it. Wouldn't be prudent. It's a bummer. It's not good. Not good characterization. Yeah, not a fan. And I don't believe it. I don't believe the Emperor. I don't believe Vader would. I mean, doesn't the Emperor quite understand how trauma works? Apparently not. But it's like, bruh, you killed the love of your life. It's not good. Not a good scene. I don't know what else to say about that. It is kind of a bummer. Anyway, what can you do? What can you do? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's an interesting show. Wait, more people are talking here. Alexander Wilson comes back and says, the dread on the Emperor's generals when the Falcon gets away with Vader walking off made the scene even better. Totally. It's total, because they all think they're going to be the next dudes to get choked out. And for me, I'll tell you something. The reason that I love The Empire Strikes Back so much, and by the way, Star Wars too, is for all of they're fairy tales. No. They're also very realistic in their portrayal of how these things would go down. Like, I believe Vader in Empire and Star Wars. I believe him. Like you don't sit there and go, oh, it's a kid's movie. There's peak verisimilitude in those films. Like, Star Wars sets it up, Empire pays it off. And when I say verisimilitude, people will be like, well, Rob, what about those visual effects? Well, I look beyond the visual effects when I talk about verisimilitude. I can see a visual effect that might not be as convincing, or I might know, hey, that's a matte painting, or hey, that's a stop motion model. Those tauntauns aren't real. But they feel, within the context of that movie, they feel real. They feel good. And I think that scene at the end, like Alexander just pointed out, by showing the cuts to the admirals, it's, first of all, it's entertaining. It's a joke too, because they know that they're next. But on the other hand, it's also sort of poignant when these generals we did everything we could. We don't know how how do they fix the hyperdrive? We disconnected it. And they know that Vader, we know as an audience, and they know within the proscenium of that frame, that Vader's not going to believe any excuse. But even by that point, Vader knows. He's like, you know what? My men did what they did what they were supposed to do. And even I have to throw my hands up and go, we'll get him next time, kid. I mean, you believe it. That was a very, believe it or not, dare I say, human moment in that movie. It's such a great a moment. And if Vader had said something, or if he'd gone, the fact, and by the way, it's his gesture too. He doesn't go, he just quietly looks. He turns, he puts his hands behind his back, securing his cape, walks off. And you don't know what he's thinking, which makes it even more badass and dangerous. That's where great directing comes in. That's when a director comes out and says, you know what you got to do? And that's why a director has to have a vision. That's why Empire Strikes Back is such a great movie, because Irvin Kershner knew what he wanted and crafted that all the way through. And that's a perfect example. if George Lucas had been directing that movie, or if Richard Marquand had been and George Lucas was overseeing Darth Vader, that moment would never have gone that way. Never would have gone that way. Dan V900 says, people who claim that the show by Filoni improved the movies didn't read the Republic comics, which did it first and was much better than that show. Look, there is no doubt, Dan. I mean, look, I have railed. I've talked about the greatness of the comics. I've talked about the greatness of the novels. Everybody that came along and did stuff was mining these ideas. And I have to say, it's unfortunate to me, because if I was running any franchise like Star Wars, Star Trek, Alien, The Predator, the first thing I would do is I would go and gather all of the secondary material, whether you call it expanded universe or not. I would get all the novels, I'd get all the comics. And I'm like, the people that wrote these have thought about these universes far longer than myself or anyone I could hire. And I'm going to read them all and figure out where we can go. But they don't do that. They don't do that. So it's sort of, it's unfortunate. I wish they did, but they didn't. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring an end to this chat. Robservations number 274, the show about something. I am, of course, your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, the Viceroy of Verisimilitude, the Master of Fun and Wonder, the existential Mr. Rogers. I want to thank you for being here. You have many choices on the internet now. I mean, I'm going live against Christian Harloff and John Campea, and you can go jump on their show if they're still on. Light Side, Dark Side is new. You've got Nerdrotic. You got Gary Beekler, which I like. I like his channel. You got everybody. You got Doomcock. You've got Midnight's Edge. I appreciate you coming here, giving me the time of day. Please visit the website, theburnettwork.net. Anybody who goes and comments on any piece of commentary anywhere on the website, you're entered to win a bottle of Lucky Tiger from Head to Tail Body Wash. It's really good. You'll really enjoy it. And that we're going to be doing that for the next 4 weeks leading up to Robservations 300. I have so many letters. Look, if you want to write me letters, I would ask this. Hold off a couple of days. Let me catch up. I've got so many letters. I got so many people that want me to read their letters. I got like 6 pages of letters that I love. Some of them, most of them actually on the website. You can already see them if they're up there. Allie State's column, The Feminine Gaze, is going to drop. She wrote, Why We Need Raylo. Can't wait for you all to read that. There's all kinds of stuff up there. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel. I want to thank people for super chats and joining up for the Post-Geek Singularity on the website. I want to thank my moderators. One of the great things about this channel is my moderating staff. Of course, we've got the OGs. We got Greg Smith. We got Detective Jim. We got Terry, the Sheriff of Nottingham. And, of course, the Honorable Mayor Mike Bodden, who is going to begin, well, he hasn't yet, but he'll begin his second term as mayor January 1st. I think that's how it works. I don't know. And then, of course, we've got the sequel moderators, not the sequel trilogy, but we've got Louis Yu, and we also have Jordy Lyons. So keep them safe. I want to thank them. If you like these chats, please hit like, please hit subscribe. Obviously, YouTubers need all of these things to continue. I'm trying to figure out what's going to happen January 1st. They're changing algorithms. Who knows? Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. But yeah, we'll see. I'll be back on the John Campea show tomorrow at 9 a.m. I've been having a blast on the John Campea show lately. So this brings to a conclusion Robservations number 274. And we're on our march to 300 episodes. So thank you very, very much. And with that, I say, remember, oh, by the way, this is a cool 2001 shirt. I should say thank you, by the way, for the compliment. This was made by Mondo. This shirt was made by Mondo. As everyone knows, I love my geeky t-shirts. Mondo made this one. I don't think they make any more. I've got my Alex DeLarge shirt from Clockwork Orange. This was such a deep cut, even if you love Clockwork Orange and know it. So I want to thank everyone for being here. Every person you meet, remember, has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I say farewell. And as always, have a better day.